Walter. A pleasure. I've been wanting to have this interview for a very, very long time, and I'm glad I finally get to do it with you for I'm Still Here. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, a lot of people have already drawn comparisons, spiritually speaking, to your previous film, Central Station, which starred Fernanda Montenegro. And this film, I'm Still Here, stars both her, but her daughter, Fernanda Torres, in this amazing performance at the center of it all here. Curious to know just how did this casting come to be? And was this connection like on your mind when going through that process?
Well, Fernanda Montenegro was an actress I always wanted to work with. We spent 10 years finding the right, project for it. And this is when I had the idea of Central Station. And it came after such a long time of carving and trying to find, I did 1, 2, wrote 3 different screenplays that weren't exactly right, and then came the idea of Central Station, and Fernanda Montenegro elevated that film to what it became. And I always say that she made us better than we were, than we thought that we could be.
Yeah.
It was an absolute pleasure to film with her, with Vinicius, and with Marila Pera, who's an actress I also admire a lot. Here there was another element that came into the frame, which was the personal connection with the story and with the family. And this is the very first time that I embraced that possibility. And I don't think I would have been able to do it if it wasn't for the incredibly luminous book that Marcelo Paiva wrote about his family's history, and about Brazil history as well. So there you had the possibility to merge a personal story with the collective story of the country, and I was always tempted by that possibility. Central Station for me was the story of a boy trying to find his father in the interior of Brazil, but it was also about all of us trying to find the heart of Brazil, the center of Brazil. Fernanda Torres and I had worked twice together, and I was in awe with her since our first project together. I really consider her a co-author of that first film called Foreign Land that we did. And in digging further and defining the character of Eunice and understanding all the layers that Marcelo was offering, it was very clear to me that here's a woman who lived a housewife life, with 5 kids, as Fernanda says, pretty much in the madman kind of realm, and then faced with a tragedy in the height of the military dictatorship in Brazil, had to reinvent a form of survival, of collective survival, because it was about grabbing the family and allowing each one of the 5 kids to survive and offer a form of resistance that was completely original, because it was based on restraint. She always refused to be seen as a victim. A woman who would say smile whenever they wanted to photograph her crying. She never allowed it to be photographed crying, due to the loss of the husband, and never allowed it the possibility of being seen as a victim, in fact. and this restraint called for kind of an acting within a bandwidth that was very, very specific, and only very talented actors, actresses, I think, can do a lot with very little, you know.
Yeah.
And this is what drew me to Fernanda, and also because I knew that this was going to be such a complex story to tell, that you needed to be circled by friends you trust, you know. And when you have a highly talented person as Fernanda, it's kind of a pleasure to go through all the phases that the film embraces, you know. So yes, a film about family done by a family of friends.
Yeah. Because it just would have been, I don't know, easier, but you could have just taken Fernanda Torres, put makeup on her, make her appear older for that section of the film. And I'm sure it would have been convincing, and I'm sure it still would have been fine. But this thematic connection, tying it into the themes of just the movie itself and your career, your working relationship with these people, I think that's just a very, very beautiful thing to do, to bring everyone together like that.
Yeah, you know, I always admired the faithfulness of between, you know, directors and actors that you find, for instance, in the films of François Truffaut or Gia Jonqueur or Martin Scorsese, you know, of creating film families that actually continue to dig deeper and deeper, and this is one of the very few projects that allowed me the possibility to have, you know, in front of the camera, but also behind the camera, you know, friends that were part of the very first filmic adventure I took part of. So it was. I think it's a film of maturity, as Fernanda says. I think it's based on the book of a writer who reaches a certain maturity in which he can understand that his mother was the silent heroine of this whole journey, and it's one where, you know, by trying to always be conducted by the desire to reach what is essential in the storytelling, in the acting, in every single part of the film. That was what was guiding us, is to find that kind of state, you know. And another thing that was important to me was kind of an honesty and immediacy that existed in the house that I knew when I was 13. I didn't want to recreate a family that you would see from a distance, but on the opposite, try to invite the spectator to live with that family for the length of that film. You know, that is, to be inside the story as opposed to seeing it from a distance, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things, too, that I was also thinking a lot about while watching this was how this is based on a true story. This is something that really did happen. This is a part of Brazilian history. Brazil's going through a new kind of history right now. But there's a part of me that's wondering, you know, how
long would it last?
Well, not even that, but just like, how far are we away from this happening just all over again, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, when someone tells you a film is timely, a film is relevant, and it's a period film that's dealing with such distressing subject matter, I'm sure on one hand that has to feel good because you made something that people care about and is topical, but at the same time, it's got to be distressing too.
Yeah, you know, I think there are two aspects to that. The first one is that when we started, you know, when we started to develop the project, I had the impression that we were going to offer a reflection of our past to eventually help to understand our present, you know. And then as time ensued, the political reality in Brazil, but also in the world, changed so drastically that we realized that we were not only doing a film about our past, but we were doing a film about the present. And the film became much more urgent. And I think that this is what really allowed us to focus and cling as a group, you know. I like to always go back to that sentence that Tarkovsky said or wrote about in one of his books, and he said that, you know, that cinema starts to exist when everybody who's doing a film in front or behind the camera is in the artery of the film, you know, is in the central vein of the film. And I think that the realization that we were doing a film that was urgent as well as a film about the past is what created the possibility to access that vein, you know, that artery. And we literally did it without knowing that it was going to be so timely. It wasn't part of the initial equation. We just wanted to tell a story that felt important, essential to us, an untold story about a Brazilian drama, but also a story of reinvention. I see it as a very life affirmative story, because that family could have dismantled completely, and the mother articulates a form of resilience and of resistance that is so unique, that somehow she manages to keep the family together, and it becomes a film about transmittance, you know, as well as resistance, you know. In this sense, it's when people come out of it and say, I'm really energized by the film, I said, well, wow, that's great, because that was one of the aims of the story of the book, and then the film also embraces this possibility.
You mentioned Marcelo earlier, who obviously the book that he wrote, this is based on. Curious to know if he had any hand or say at all in. Well, I was going to say particularly with the casting vow, you know, because he you know, and not even in terms of like the decision making, just more so in like what was his response when he saw either met members of the cast or saw the film. That's how they captured his family.
You know, Marcelo, besides being a great writer, he's a screenwriter as well. So he was during the whole process a very close collaborator, and at the same time he could see it from within and from a distance. You know, which is very rare, and it's really it takes a completely free-spirited a mind to be able to do that, and a generosity as well. You know, the fact that we cling to the real facts from beginning to the end, including the fact that at the very end of the story, Eunice comes back from the state that she's in, you know, in the Alzheimer, and for a few moments is in synchronicity with the time she lives in, you know, everybody else is living in, by watching her husband photograph on television. That truly happened. So that the film was really based on the book and the events that the book allowed it to surface, you know. So we were pretty close to that, but he never interfered, you know. But sometimes he would say, it's too verbal. There's There's too many dialogues, and he was right. I did cut a lot of together with the extraordinary editor with whom I worked, Afonso Gonçalves. We kind of decanted some of the more verbal scenes and transformed them into more subjective scenes, especially after the military in civilian clothes occupied the house.
Yeah.
For one reason, one of the aspects that we rarely mention, but that military dictatorship affects is language itself, because you can't express yourself freely again, anymore. So at one point, in order to understand what's happening, one character of the story has to look at the reaction of another character of the story, and then the narrative becomes, as a consequence, much more subjective, and sometimes more impressionistic also,
Yeah.
And the film becomes a film about subtraction. Everything is subtracted. The light is subtracted as they close the shades in the window. The sounds are muffled because the house is closed. The turntable isn't functioning anymore, so the music that rhythm the whole first part is now absent, and the dialogue is restricted to the minimum, and the camera movements are also restricted to the minimum. So from that very fluid state at the beginning, you are in subtraction mode from that moment on, and we it was really fascinating to understand how much we could say with the shortest possible amount of elements, of narrative elements.
Yeah. It's like they say about how people will give like quietly reserved performances. This is one that's very quietly powerful in how that stoicism, but yet that inner strength is something that is very important in order to carry on with dignity through such a horrific tragedy. I want to end on this note here because we only have a little bit of time left. This is your 10th narrative feature film. There was 12 years since On the Road. I'm hoping and I'm praying that it's not going to be another 12 years before the 11th. Please tell me you're working on something else right now.
I do have a screenplay that I developed with the two writers from Uruguay that is actually ready. So that may be shot, in the near future. But for the time being, I'm not very good at developing 2 or 3 things at the same time. So I'm just enjoying the possibility of exchanging ideas like we're doing now, and understanding more. It's incredible how much you learn from your film from those exchanges, as you go from culture to culture. So I find it a very pleasant part of the process. But at this stage, I don't think I will start a film that I'm not completely involved with, and that transcends admiration. Because that one thing that I understood in certain projects that I did is that, the fact that you admire something doesn't mean that you have all the instruments to tell that story as it should, and what I learned from I'm Still Here is the fact that when you do have a personal tie and a very direct connection, the materials comes to life in such a textured and interesting manner that it makes it more complex to develop, because you have to deal with layers that you're not accustomed to, but it also makes the whole journey more fascinating because you're entering foreign territory.
Yeah.
Which at the end of the day is what cinema should be. You know, I became enamored by cinema because it in going to in seeing films, I understood that the world was much, you know, wider and much more polyphonic than I ever thought it could be. And at the end of the day, also, a film, when you do a film, you have to enter foreign territory, you know, places you haven't fully investigated yet. So I will be very careful in the next one, but I hope it's not going to take 12 years. You know?
Hey, well, it's very clear you invested a lot into this. It made me cry. It's made other audiences cry and feel the power of the story. Walter, you're still here. We're not going to forget you. Thank you so much for all the art you've given us. Thank you.
It's an enormous pleasure. It was really great. Thank you.